Keep your calls coming in because I know from previous experience that our next guest will be as thought-provoking as any guest in the whole wide world could be. He is the academic superstar. He is the man in demand, and he's kindly agreed to join us again. It is Professor Jeffrey Sachs. Professor, there's so much I'd like to talk to you about, but let me start with the kinetics, as our friend Garland Nixon put it just half an hour ago on the show. The kinetics look like they're about to restart. The kinetics of military power that is being resupplied, built up at a rate of knots. The pieces are all in place, and Trump has rejected the Iranian peace plan. So my first question, is the war about to restart, in your opinion?
Probably so. Probably so. As insane as it is, nothing good, of course, has come from anything that's happened up until now. And anything that follows with more war will be disastrous. We've already seen that the United States and Israel cannot achieve anything positive, even for their own objectives, much less for the world. And yet, it is likely that it's going to start again. There are some specific issues of timing. Trump's supposed to be in China in just a short time, in about 2 weeks. Does he want to go with a disastrous war? Maybe even the meeting again would not happen in those circumstances. So he's got other things on his mind, but everything points to a resumption of fighting because Trump is that stupid.
You see, I was schooled, not formally, but informally schooled, in the belief that great men don't make history, that history follows a more scientific path. Maybe I was taught wrongly, but that's what I was taught. And yet this war seems to be entirely dependent on the personality of Donald Trump. He's not a great man, of course, but he is a big man. And he is a man with a great deal of power right now at this historic moment. Because the markets can't want a war. The oil market can't want a war. Industry can't want a war. The economic captains of our industrial heartlands and so, they cannot want a war. We're told the American officer class doesn't want a war. And so if there is a war, it seems to rest on the tortured, fevered speculation and social media ramblings and so on of one individual. How can that be?
Well, at first, there are two crazy individuals here. There's Trump and there's Netanyahu. They're both nuts. They're both pathological liars. They are both psychopaths, actually, meaning that they kill and they inflict harm without any remorse, actually any normal human emotion, I would say. So we have two, folie à deux, as the psychiatrists call it, and they play off of each other. Israel definitely wants this war to restart. They say so without any equivocation. The Minister of War in Israel, the Minister of Defense, says, yes, the war should start again. This is Israel's dream that the United States military will defeat Iran so that Israel can have military hegemony throughout the Middle East and West Asia. So they're egging this on. Then there are parts of our corporate military industrial complex definitely egging this on. Strangely enough, or maybe not strangely enough, in Silicon Valley, which has become basically the heartland of the new military industrial complex. George, they want to test their new weapons. They want to test their AI systems. They want to test their drones. They want to test an AI-enabled battleground. And I mean it in a literal sense. You can't have all those weapons developed without trying them. It's not good enough to do a simulation. We want to see how many people can be killed, whether you can really control the airspace, whether you can really do AI-based targeting. Yeah, you kill some schoolgirls, but come on, this is all in the process of learning. So Palantir is our most visible part of the military-industrial complex now, but every major AI big tech company is deeply engaged with the Pentagon now. They want this war because it's business, but more than that, it's improving their models. It's improving their future contracts. It's demonstrating what can be done. And so I think a lot of the Pentagon, maybe not the ones that have to command troops, but a lot of the Pentagon that's interested in procurement, that's interested in technology, wants this war to continue. Then, of course, we have the individual personalities. And you raise a very important question. Do individuals make a difference? Well, when there are systems, the answer is no, not so much. But we have completely broken all rational systems in the United States. And by that, I mean the actual processes of decision-making are quite exposed right now, and they rest with Trump. It's weird, but it's not an exaggeration. We know a lot about how this war started on February 28th. Netanyahu and the head of Mossad came and gave a bullshit story to Trump. Trump was a fool enough to buy it or to go along with it, given his range of pressure points and interests and delusions. Everyone else in this small room basically thought it was nuts, except for Hegseth, who's an absolute blooming idiot right alongside Trump. And so the Pentagon chief of staff, not interested. CIA thought it was a bad idea. The vice president of the United States openly has said this is a bad idea. Rubio, completely worthless, a joke, unfortunately. We don't have any diplomacy. Susan Wiles, chief of staff, I don't know if she played a role. Jared Kushner, come on. And Steve Witkoff, that's the team. We're not talking about an interagency process. We're not talking about intelligence estimates. We're not talking about a plan. We're not talking about the president of the United States consulting with congressional leaders. We're not talking about American public opinion, which runs overwhelmingly against everything that is happening. So we're talking about a few people led by a delusional old man who never was very good at anything, but is very bad at this. And even in the room of sycophants that he has, no one believed it except perhaps Hegseth, who is his own special case in all of this. So there's no process. This is a case where an individual can make decisions. He violates the Constitution because the Constitution says in the United States under Article 1 that it's only Congress that can declare war. But most presidents have ignored that. Trump completely, brazenly, and almost, no members at all of Trump's own party in the Republican leadership murmur even a word about consultation, much less congressional constitutional responsibility. Netanyahu's his own case. He's a very, very dark, pathological figure. I've called him a son of a bitch in the past, and I feel that that's a mild description for a mass murderer, actually. So this is what we have. We do not have either rational leadership or a rational process in, I think, either country, the U.S. Or Israel. Israel, well, actually, both countries add a strain of religious zealotry, which is also pretty strange in the year 2026 for two nuclear-armed countries. But it's not an incidental part of this story also. Certainly not in the Israeli case, even if that's just part of a political coalition. It's two of the three leaders in Israel are messianic zealots who read from a genocidal account of Israel's conquest of Canaan in the book of Joshua and take that as a literal text for what Israel should be doing right now. The United States sent an ambassador to Israel, Mr. Huckabee, who says out loud exactly that he agrees with that approach. So this is another aspect of the irrationality that we're facing.
Peculiarity indeed, and unlucky we are to be alive at this moment. Maybe we won't be for very much longer.
Well, we want to stay alive.
We want to stay alive. Our friend Tucker Carlson, a not inconsiderable man, said today that spending a day with Donald Trump is peculiarly intoxicating. He seems to have a kind of spell that creates an atmosphere around him. And before you know it, he said, I wouldn't know, I've never smoked marijuana, but he said it's a bit like being under the influence of marijuana. A day on the hash is how he described a day with Donald Trump. I don't know if you recognize that. I would have thought myself, looking from the far outside, that Donald Trump is a vulgar bore. He certainly wouldn't mesmerize me. But if he could mesmerize someone as considerable as Tucker Carlson, maybe I've judged him wrongly.
Well, I've never been with Trump, and certainly watching him from the outside, he's deeply pathological. I agree with a very long list of distinguished psychologists and psychiatrists that say he has the so-called dark triad personality of narcissism, of psychopathy, of megalomania. He has been called by very important forensic psychologists and psychiatrists a malignant narcissist, which was a term invented for Hitler. Hitler had a charisma too, to use Max Weber's sociological idea. He attracted followers. Some of the sickest people in German society of the day. And Trump attracts people too. He has a following. The following is a minority of Americans. Most Americans find Donald Trump repulsive. His approval rating right now is, according to the latest Ipsos Reuters poll, 34% approval, and I believe it's 62% disapproval. And when the disapprovals are queried, it's strong disapproval for most of those disapprovals. In other words, most Americans find Donald Trump repulsive, actually, not charismatic. This is important. He is doing what he's doing not because of American jingoism, not because American society is calling for it, not because of selling a story of glory to the American people. He's doing this as a one-person act, or two-person act if you count Netanyahu in this. And Americans are deeply against this. But to come back to your opening question, if he actually goes forward, I think the point that many people have been telling Trump, which is that within a couple of weeks of such a decision, the world could be irreparably damaged, is really the point for us. Because the next round of fighting, if there is going to be one, and it looks likely, will lead to massive destruction of the physical infrastructure of the whole Gulf region. And no doubt Iran has all of its targets set. And they will aim to show, as best they can, deterrence. And they have thousands of missiles left. And it doesn't take much to knock out desalination plants, oil and gas fields, refineries, ports, pipelines, civilian infrastructure linked to all of that. It could happen in hours or days, which is why there was a pause in the first place. This is a losing story. This is a disaster. Nothing was accomplished by the fighting. And Trump was forced in a way to understand that, even if he doesn't accept that. Nothing was accomplished. And we sit here now with the oil prices at about $115 a barrel. If the shooting resumes, it will soar. That will look like nothing compared to what will come in a resumption of a shooting war. But even at $115 a barrel, which is at least a 50% increase of oil prices from what they were on February 27, before the war started, this is already creating grave economic harms all over the world. But what will happen if the shooting starts again will make what's happened to date look insignificant.
Indeed, I wanted to move on to that field, leaving the Gulf itself for a minute. We'll come back to it, and going downstream. Downstream, where I live, or at least ordinarily live, in Britain, in Europe, it's difficult to overstate the catastrophe that is coming down that pipeline, down that strait towards us. We are already in the apparently gravest economic difficulty, and I'm thinking that economic life as we know it will effectively cease across much of Europe. If we are talking of oil at $150 to $200 a barrel, or maybe unavailable at all, well, certainly any factory I've ever worked in will have to cease its activity, and the economy in general will simply seize up for want of the greatest essentials. Agriculture is already in crisis, even in your country, because the fertilizer that comes down the Strait of Hormuz also. There are many things, not just oil, gas, fertilizer, minerals, so many things will simply cease to be available, and the supply chain will be completely broken, won't it?
Of course, we will have a catastrophic outcome. And if, unlike the previous disruptions to oil supplies from this region, which were famous in the 1970s, one after the 1973 war, and one after the Iranian Revolution in 1979. Those were huge, huge negative shocks to the world economy, which were disruptive for years and in some ways through debt crises for decades to come for some countries. But what happened then was a temporary closing of the spigot. What would happen now, most likely within 2 or 3 weeks, is a destruction of the spigot itself that could not be replaced for 5, 10 years of physical rebuilding. And even then, the investments that would be needed to do that and the perilous nature of such investments after just having been blown up would put everything in doubt. So we're talking about something that has not happened since World War II. And I think the crisis that would come within a short period of time would be comparable to, let me put it a different way, would be larger than anything that has happened since the Second World War, all of the big crises that we've had. And what happens, as you know, is not only would, of course, the economies be deeply disrupted, but then come the financial crises that follow, because all of the outstanding lending and borrowing and investments that have come have been predicated on a completely different set of assumptions from the ones that would prevail. So there would be bankruptcies galore. Our governments will find the interest costs on massive debts that they have accumulated over the last 20 years soaring. This will create currency crises. This will create banking crises. Only a complete ignoramus and idiot would restart the fighting again. But as I said, it's likely. This is the paradox right now. It's likely that absolutely the dumbest imaginable thing one could do is actually odds on.
Now, I said we'd come back to the Gulf, and I promise we will, but I'm interviewing you now from Moscow, where preparations are heavily underway for the Victory Day celebration, parade, and so on. I attended the Victory Museum the other day, and I made the point when I was coming out that the Victory Museum, that Russophobia does not survive a visit to the Victory Museum. The cost of the World War II to the people of this part of the world was, of course, greater than any other, and the contribution.
Yes, and by the way,
to the defeat
and the shame of it that we in the United States or in Britain or in continental Europe are so nasty not to recognize that fact that the Soviet Union lost 27 million people defeating Hitler and bore the brunt of it, and then would not even show up to the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Hitler because it was Russia. But Russia defeated Hitler, bearing the vast brunt of the war. And this shows the mindlessness of our countries, actually, of our leadership. How cruel, by the way. Same with China, incidentally. China lost an estimated 14 million people to Japan's invasion. And when China had the 80th anniversary of the defeat of Japan, no Western government would show up. The ingratitude, the lack of the most basic decency and historical knowledge is really something disgusting on our side. And then Trump, because, I mean, I hate to come back to him in this context, but he says, yes, we defeated Hitler and Russia helped. I mean, it just is the cruelty of the stupidity, because there's stupidity, of course, but it's so stupid, it becomes absolutely cruel in its stupidity. That's where we are. Anyway, I interrupted
It's quite
you, George. Sorry.
toxic mix. No, not at all. No, fascinating that you did. I've written a piece for the Chinese media tomorrow because this is the eve of the Tokyo trials, which of course are long forgotten in the West. I suspect even by academics, in which, and are never referred to. I mean, the Nuremberg trials aren't referred to all that often, but far more often than the Tokyo trials.
Absolutely.
And all kinds of bizarre things happened in the Tokyo trials. First of all, it was like Hitler being exempted from the Nuremberg trial. Hirohito was exempted and was allowed to live out his life with everyone calling him emperor. The Unit 731 that conducted hideous biological experiments on Chinese prisoners and civilians was allowed to trade the results of those experiments with the Americans in return for their freedom from prosecution. I don't want to give away too much of my
and George,
article, but
but just incidentally, in the German context, the U.S. hired those very scientists, and the program was called Operation Paperclip, which refers to the fact that when Nazi scientists were to be brought to the United States, and the State Department was objecting, but the military wanted these scientists because they knew how to torture people. They knew all of these experiments, these absolutely gruesome, grotesque experiments. You'd put a paperclip on their file, and that would tell the State Department, keep your hands off. This is the military or the CIA. We're bringing them in. And this is recounted in an incredible book by a wonderful reporter named Annie Jacobson about Operation Paperclip. So it's the same with Japan. We not only exonerated these scientists, we hired them. They became the head of our military research programs, these Nazi scientists.
Incredible. We're supposed to love Japan now and hate China. And love Germany and hate Russia. For someone my age, that's an impossible ask, actually, having grown up in the shadow of the Second World War as I
And if I could say something about that, George, can I just add one more word about that, because I feel very strongly about it.
Sure.
I want Japan, which I like. I like many Japanese. I have many friends, colleagues. We've lived in Japan. I want them to say, sorry, we were responsible for killing 14 million people in China, and we have no animus against China. Indeed, we don't want to be divided by the United States in some geopolitical game anymore. I would like Japan and China actually to work together. I would like Germany not to be playing games with, let's say, revanchist or revenge thoughts, which they flirt with right now, and rather say, we're sorry, 27 million dead, and isn't it really time that the Chancellor of Germany and the President of Russia sit down and start again a normal, peaceful, indivisible security for Europe and put the United States out of this? Maybe Trump did. I think he did a favor. I wish Germany would take it up when Trump said we're withdrawing 5,000 troops. If the German chancellor had any sense, he would say, take them all home. We don't want to be occupied. It's 81 years since the war ended. And I'm going to go visit my counterpart, President Putin, and we're going to make peace on our continent finally the right way. So instead of the United States siding with the aggressors of World War II against the countries that actually were the allies in World War II, we should, in the United States, get the heck out of both regions. And both regions should understand that their real security comes not from something like NATO, God forbid, or American military bases in Japan. Their real security comes from making peace with their neighbors. That's where security comes from, not from an American military sitting there. And if the Gulf countries had learned that too, they wouldn't be in the disastrous situation they're in right now.
If there's any redeeming feature in Donald Trump, it is that he seems not to want war with Russia for whatever reason. And many speculate on what that reason might be. I have no idea. But I do get the impression he would like the Ukraine war to come to an end, and that it is others who are determined that it should continue. The others being in his own circle, in the Democrats, in the Congress, in the military-industrial complex, and above all, perhaps, in the European governments. Do you think what was established at Alaska, the spirit of Alaska, the spirit of Anchorage in a big full-dress summit between Putin and Trump, is that dead, or does it still have legs?
Well, the problem, among other things, is first the constituency for war in the U.S., in Britain, especially in Britain, perhaps, and in Germany, is very strong. And so it would take a highly competent American president to say no and explain why to the American people. Trump is fundamentally incompetent. This is a big part of the story. Trump has never had a coherent explanation to the American public about this issue that we're talking about. There's been no speech to say the war should stop because NATO enlargement wasn't a good idea, or because there could be an alternative security arrangement. He's not smart enough, unfortunately, to give the speech, and he doesn't have anyone around him to write it and put it on the damn teleprompter and get it done. So I think you're right. It was my sense, too, that he didn't want this war to continue. But when he started to say it should stop, then you had on a bipartisan basis in the U.S. Senate, no, the war must go on. We're defending freedom, selling military goods. You had the Democrat like Richard Blumenthal, senator from Connecticut, and Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, from the Republican side, demanding war, more war. And then, of course, Britain is the most Russophobic country in modern history. By the way, for no reason. If you go back historically, it's a fascinating phenomenon. British Russophobia, which dates from around 1840. But the British imperial rulers got the idea that Russia was the big threat to the British Empire, and concocted every crazy story about Russians passing through the Khyber Pass to invade the Indian subcontinent. And they concocted the Crimean War in 1853, Lord Palmerston, all with Russophobia. Well, that Russophobia has continued actually until today. And someone as incompetent as Starmer, and it's a long list of incompetence, they're all Russophobic. And Merz, come on, if you're a German chancellor, are you kidding? Do you have any understanding of the right kind that you have a certain responsibility to actually address this issue from a historical and a realistic point of view. Germany had such chancellors with Willy Brandt and Helmut Schmidt and Helmut Kohl. And Angela Merkel got it, but she was too weak. She was bowled over in the end by the American presidents. But basically, this guy is unreal. I don't know where I got to on this rant, except that the Russophobia is so blinding. And it's for Britain, it's been, I know where we were, it's been 180 years. I was going to mention, by the way, there was a wonderful book written in 1950, which I had the chance to read a few years ago, which I discovered only a few years ago, by a historian who asked the question, where did this Russophobia come from? And he posed the question. He said in 1815, Britain and Russia were allies against Napoleon. And then 25 years later, Britain was a staunch Russophobic country, and Russia had done nothing. So what happened? Where did it come from? So he read everything, every speech in the parliament, every magazine article and so forth. And the conclusion of the book, no reason. It just was invented. And it was basically this confabulation of Russia as the great medieval, oriental, eastern threat to the British Empire. And it's continued for 180 years since then. Now, you asked me about Trump. He was not strong enough, knowledgeable enough, capable enough to be a good president, which would require skill, actually, to manage this. The president would have to speak over the heads of the military-industrial complex to the American public to explain to them this war made no sense. It should stop. It could stop. Russia's not going to invade Western Europe. That's not the issue. But we don't have to put NATO into Ukraine because that's a provocation that we wouldn't like if Russia tried to establish a military base in Mexico. Or when they tried in Cuba, the world almost ended because we said that's a cause for war. So if a president explained this straightforwardly when he came into office, the war would be over. But he's not capable of this. And no one around him is capable of that modest maneuver. And so I think on the Russian side, they have basically lost interest. They don't believe anything good can come out of Washington. President Putin has a very famous interview in Figaro in 2017 where he said, at that point, he said, I've dealt with 3 American presidents. They come into office with ideas, but then men in dark suits with briefcases and blue ties come to tell them the way that it really is. And then you never hear of those ideas again. And I think Putin really nails it with that the American system is a military-industrial complex. Europe surprised me, frankly, at how enthusiastic it was to double down on this in a kind of economically suicidal way, and perhaps even a militarily suicidal way in the future. But that's where we are. And I don't think the Russians give any serious thought to negotiated outcomes at this stage. I think they're just trying to achieve their military aims at this point and are not expecting Trump to do anything useful in that.